because the LPGA just did everything that the WNBA should have been doing this season. And I have only seen and heard of positive things. I didn't hear one thing about how her fans are toxic. I didn't hear one thing about there being too much spotlight on Caitlin Clark, and it should have maybe been on the professional golfers that are.
The WNBA held emergency meetings within hours of this leak. What they discussed behind closed doors isn't just about one contract. It's about the systematic collapse of their entire strategy for controlling their biggest star. I'm Jackson Riley, and I've been filtering through the digital breadcrumbs left by this institutional meltdown. And what I've uncovered exposes a power struggle that goes way deeper than anyone's covering. Here's what the other channels won't tell you. Caitlin Clark's carefully worded response about focusing on basketball isn't retreat, it's calculated warfare. And the WNBA's conspicuous silence while their crown jewel generates massive headlines for a competitor league? That's institutional. Panic in real time? Stick around because I'm about to connect dots that reveal how one golf swing exposed the WNBA's biggest strategic vulnerability, and why Clark might already be 3 moves ahead in a chess game most people don't even realize is being played. But first, let me paint you the complete picture of what actually happened, because the timeline tells a story that nobody else is connecting. Rachel Nichols drops the LPGA contract leak during a live ESPN segment. Within minutes, social media explodes. Within hours, and this is where it gets interesting, multiple sources confirm emergency WNBA meetings are happening. But here's what they missed while scrambling for damage control. The LPGA had been executing what sports marketing experts call aspirational athlete positioning, treating Clark like royalty to elevate their own brand association. They adjusted Golf Channel programming, started coverage 90 minutes early, and generated a 1,200% ticket increase. Meanwhile, the WNBA? Complete radio silence. No congratulations, no acknowledgement, no strategic messaging whatsoever. Now let's get into rumor territory. Nothing is officially confirmed, but the online chatter is too loud to ignore. Sources suggest those emergency meetings weren't just about Clark potentially playing golf. They were about the systematic failure of their entire approach to managing their most valuable asset. Because here's the reality they're finally confronting. Clark generates 25% of WNBA revenue and 45% of total broadcast value, yet earns $76,000, while LPGA tournaments pay 6 figures just to show up.
Fans were really excited about that. There was so much buzz online. She was trending on Twitter, all of the things. And the LPGA was promoting the crap out of this. It just goes to show that all of us who have been speaking out about this and saying, like, it doesn't seem like you guys are giving Caitlin, the kind of props that she deserves for bringing all these eyeballs and, the Caitlin Clark effect that we talk about, viewership, money, all of those things. All of the people who were shouting this for the entire WNBA season, this is an instance where you see her at this event, you see the kind of noise that this is making, you see that this is trending on social media, you see that SportsCenter, Bleacher Report, all of these places, every media outlet is covering this, and you don't say anything.
The temperature of the online conversation suggests something deeper is happening here. Reddit communities are connecting patterns. The RWNBA subreddit erupted with a petition demanding WNBA leadership changes, specifically citing their mishandling of the Clark effect. But that's just the surface level. Following the digital breadcrumbs reveals an influence network that's been building pressure for months. Dave Portnoy, with his 2.8 million followers, has been consistently calling out what he perceives as league hypocrisy regarding Clark. Every time he posts Clark-related content, it creates viral amplification cycles that the WNBA can't control. And now, the LPGA leak has given him and similar voices ammunition to validate every criticism they've been making about institutional mismanagement. But here's where the story gets really interesting, and this is the angle nobody's covering. Clark's response wasn't defensive. It wasn't apologetic. She said she's focused on basketball, but notably didn't deny the LPGA discussions. In media strategy, that's called controlled ambiguity, maintaining all options while letting the pressure build. And the pressure is building on exactly the right targets. Because while everyone's focused on the golf contract, they're missing the broader power dynamics at play. Clark's camp isn't just holding one alternative option. They're demonstrating that she has alternatives, period. When your trading card sells for $366,000, more than the WNBA maximum salary, and other leagues are literally adjusting their programming schedules around your appearance, you're not just an athlete anymore. You're a market force. The WNBA's strategic vulnerability is now completely exposed. They built their recent growth strategy around Clark, but they never built a retention strategy for Clark. They assumed she'd be grateful for the platform, but they forgot she was already bigger than the platform when she arrived. The LPGA leak revealed that other organizations understand her value better than her own league.
All of their golfers in one event. And you would be crazy to think that they're not going to have another event and invite Caitlin to it. They're going to invite Caitlin to as many events as they possibly can. That's what we were talking about this whole season. We were correct. The fans that were saying that the WNBA seems to be trying to quiet the noise of Caitlin Clark, not letting her shine to her full ability, and not, in turn, not helping your own players in the league. We were
Okay. Now let's get into rumor territory again, because the signals point to something most channels are missing entirely. Industry insiders are suggesting that Clark's team has been strategically documenting every missed opportunity, every promotional failure, every instance where the WNBA failed to capitalize on her star power. The golf crossover isn't just about exploring options, it's about building a portfolio of evidence for future negotiations, and those future negotiations are coming sooner than people think. Clark's rookie contract runs through 2028, but there are performance incentives and renegotiation triggers that could activate much earlier. The LPGA leak just demonstrated that she has leverage the WNBA didn't think existed. But the institutional meltdown goes deeper than contract discussions. I've been tracking the narrative patterns, and the WNBA's messaging strategy has been consistently reactive rather than proactive. When Clark breaks viewership records, they mention it quietly. When she generates controversy, they stay silent. When she explores other opportunities, they panic. That's not the behavior of a confident organization that understands its own value proposition. The competitor analysis shows the LPGA executing a masterclass in athlete relations while the WNBA stumbles through crisis management. Clark participated in the Annika Pro-Am, paired with world number 1 Nelly Korda and tournament namesake Annika Sorenstam. The event generated extraordinary social media engagement, trending on Twitter, and the LPGA promoted it heavily. Compare that to how the WNBA presented Clark's Rookie of the Year award in a near-empty arena with minimal fanfare. The contrast isn't just about event planning, it's about understanding star value and treating stars accordingly. The LPGA gave Clark the royal treatment because they recognize that association with her elevates their brand. The WNBA treats her like any other player because they're still operating under outdated assumptions about athlete hierarchy. Here's what's really happening behind the scenes, and this connects to broader industry patterns that most people are missing. The women's sports landscape is experiencing what business analysts call a talent migration pressure point. Female athletes are increasingly exploring multi-sport opportunities to maximize earning potential during compressed career windows. Clark isn't just exploring golf, she's exploring the future of athlete empowerment. and other WNBA stars are paying attention. Official sources won't tell you this, but if you follow the digital breadcrumbs, a different picture emerges of players quietly evaluating their own alternative options.
Caitlin Clark played golf during the week, and obviously it was a big deal. Surprisingly enough, an almost bigger deal than on.
The financial reality that triggered this entire situation exposes systematic problems that go beyond individual contracts. The WNBA's revenue-sharing model allocates only 20% to player salaries, while the NBA provides 50%. Despite Clark generating an estimated 25% of WNBA revenue, her salary remains capped by league structure. That's not sustainable when alternative leagues are offering superior compensation for limited appearances. But let's pull the thread further, because the real story isn't about Clark leaving basketball. It's about Clark forcing basketball to evolve. The emergency meetings, the panic response, the conspicuous silence, these are symptoms of an organization realizing they've been playing checkers while their biggest asset has been playing chess. The LPGA leak served multiple strategic purposes that most analysts completely missed. First, it demonstrated Clark's market value beyond basketball. Second, it exposed the WNBA's reactive rather than proactive approach to star management. Third, it created public pressure for institutional change that fans have been demanding for months. And here's where it gets really interesting from a power dynamics perspective. Clark's calculated silence isn't just about maintaining negotiating leverage. It's about forcing the WNBA to publicly demonstrate how they value their most important asset. Every day they don't respond strategically to her exploring alternatives. They validate the criticism that they don't understand modern athlete relations. I've been connecting the dots across multiple influence networks, and there's a convergence happening that suggests this story is far from over. Golf Twitter embraced Clark overwhelmingly, contrasting sharply with some WNBA social media tensions. Conservative sports commentators positioned her as validation of their critiques about WNBA internal dynamics. Sports business analysts used the story to highlight broader women's sports compensation issues. That's three different communities finding validation in the same story, which creates viral amplification cycles that traditional sports coverage can't control. The WNBA's silence while these narratives build isn't strategic positioning. It's institutional paralysis.
Caitlin Clark played some golf, and what we saw from Caitlin Clark playing golf was the LPGA being really happy about it.
But here's what the temperature of the online conversation really reveals about where this is heading. TikTok viral content around Clark's golf appearance generated millions of views. Even her mishits became content opportunities that other creators leveraged for both humorous and critical purposes. That's the kind of cross-platform cultural penetration that transcends sports marketing into mainstream entertainment relevance. The WNBA missed every opportunity to participate in or guide that conversation. While Clark generated massive cross-platform engagement for golf, her own league remained conspicuously absent from the viral moment. That's not just a missed marketing opportunity. It's evidence of systematic failure to understand modern athlete value creation. Now, official sources won't tell you this, but filtering through the noise reveals patterns that suggest the institutional meltdown extends beyond immediate crisis management. Multiple industry insiders are reporting that Clark's golf crossover has prompted other female athletes to reconsider their own multi-sport possibilities. If that trend develops, the WNBA could face a broader talent retention crisis. The broader implications here connect to fundamental shifts in how female athletes are approaching career strategy. Clark's crossover represents part of a larger movement, where compressed career windows are forcing strategic thinking about maximizing earning potential across multiple platforms. The WNBA's traditional model assumes athlete gratitude and loyalty. The new model demands athlete empowerment and choice. And here's where Clark's chess game becomes really sophisticated. By exploring high-profile alternatives while maintaining her basketball focus, she's demonstrating that elite female athletes can command premium treatment across multiple sports. That precedent doesn't just benefit Clark, it elevates expectations for how leagues should treat all star players. The emergency meetings that happened within hours of the leak weren't just about damage control. They were about confronting the reality that their star player has options they didn't anticipate and leverage they can't control. Reading the signals from league behavior patterns suggests they're scrambling to develop retention strategies that should have been implemented months ago. But the damage to institutional credibility might already be irreversible. The fan community. Polarization has intensified beyond typical sports debate into fundamental questions about league competence. When your own fan base is creating petitions demanding leadership changes based on mishandling your biggest star, that's not a public relations problem. That's an organizational crisis. The competitive analysis reveals that while other leagues are adapting to modern athlete empowerment trends, the WNBA is still operating under assumptions that worked when athletes had fewer alternatives. Clark's situation has exposed that strategic lag in the most public way possible. Here's what I think happens next, and this is where following the digital breadcrumbs leads to some interesting conclusions. Clark continues exploring multi-sport opportunities while maintaining her basketball focus, but each exploration increases pressure on the WNBA to demonstrate they understand her value. The league either adapts their approach to star management or faces continued criticism from increasingly sophisticated fan communities. The influence networks that amplified this story aren't going away. Dave Portnoy, golf Twitter, Reddit communities, and sports business analysts have all found validation in Clark's crossover appeal. Every future interaction between Clark and the WNBA will be evaluated through the lens of whether the league has learned from this institutional meltdown. But the real long-term impact goes beyond individual contract negotiations. Clark has demonstrated that elite female athletes can command respect and compensation across multiple sports platforms. That precedent changes expectations for how leagues should treat all star players, not just Clark. The systematic problems this leak exposed – inadequate compensation structures, reactive messaging strategies, failure to capitalize on star power. These aren't problems that emergency meetings can solve overnight. They require fundamental shifts in how the WNBA approaches athlete relations and value recognition. And here's the ultimate irony that makes this whole situation so revealing. The WNBA needed Clark more than Clark needed the WNBA, but they operated under the assumption that platform access was sufficient compensation for star power. The LPGA leak destroyed that assumption permanently. Clark's calculated response about focusing on basketball while not denying alternative discussions? That's not just media training. That's strategic communication that maintains maximum leverage while forcing institutional change. She's not just playing chess, she's teaching the WNBA how chess works. The temperature of the online conversation suggests this story has staying power beyond typical sports cycles because it touches on fundamental questions about athlete empowerment, institutional competence, and fair compensation that resonate across multiple communities. Clark's golf swing didn't just generate headlines. It generated a cultural conversation about how women's sports should operate in the modern landscape. So what's fact and what's speculation? The emergency meetings happened. The LPGA offer was real. Clark's response was strategically crafted. The WNBA's silence was institutional panic. Everything else is reading the signals and connecting the dots. But those dots point to a fundamental power shift that most coverage is completely missing. This isn't just about basketball anymore. It's about control, leverage, and precedent setting. For how elite female athletes navigate their careers, Clark isn't just making history, she's changing the rules. And the WNBA's institutional meltdown proves they weren't ready for an athlete who understood the game better than the league itself. The LPGA didn't just offer Clark a contract. They offered her respect, recognition, and compensation that matched her value. The WNBA's panic response reveals they finally understand what they've been missing. The question is whether they'll adapt fast enough to retain not just Clark, but the credibility they need to attract future stars who will expect the same level of strategic thinking Clark is demonstrating. What do you think is Clark's golf? Exploration, strategic leverage, or genuine interest in multi-sport career development? How should the WNBA respond to maintain credibility with their star players? Drop your analysis in the comments because I want to hear how you're reading these signals. If this kind of behind-the-scenes strategic analysis is what you're looking for, subscribe to join the narrative analysts who understand that the real stories happen between the headlines. We're building a community of people who see the chess moves while others are focused on individual pieces. And share this with anyone who needs to understand that Clark's institutional disruption is just getting started. The power dynamics have shifted, and the leagues that adapt fastest will attract the next generation of elite female athletes who expect strategic respect, not just platform access. The institutional meltdown is complete. What happens next depends on whether the WNBA learned from getting outplayed by their own star.